Sarah Ezrin, thank you
Hi.
so much for joining me.
I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. And, I just want to say really quickly that you played an instrumental role in my teaching. When I first started practicing Ashtanga, you were in the room and we became friends. We got to know one another. And then when I started to be able to sub for Yoga Works, you threw me a bunch of classes, which got the attention of the students as well as the management and the corporate office. And it was through the classes that I taught for you, especially, and Calvin a little bit, that enabled me to be able to step into that arena. So, and that stepping into Yoga Works changed everything for me. So first of all, I wanted to acknowledge you for that and thank you very much for everything that you've always done and supported me on. And you've been a wonderful friend, and I am very honored to have you here today.
Well, you're so sweet. And, even though I may have opened the door, you're the one that walked through, so I love having my friends with me wherever I am. And, I just wanted to share whatever I had with you as well. I saw the light in your eye from the second you came in that room and how dedicated a practitioner you were and just how cool of a person, and then blending those together to be a phenomenal teacher. So I'm grateful that I opened the door, but you did it, right? You walked your way in there, and you're the one who was doing the work. But thank you. I appreciate that. I love knowing that there was like a little seed, or at least I sprinkled some water on a seed. Let's say you were the seed for sure. But
for sure. No, you definitely did that. And thank you very much. It's been a wonderful journey. And I want to talk to you about where you started with your yoga practice, where it transitioned from being a student into a teacher. And then we'll start from there, and then we'll move into your book and into the new chapter of your adventure of parenthood and all of that. But where did your journey begin with your yoga practice?
I mean, where did it begin? It began in 2019, I was 19. It began in 2001. It was not 6 years ago. It was 2001. I was 19, and it began as a joke. Do you know this story?
No.
Oh my God. Okay. So I was turning 19. I was, I was on a different path. I was having a very good time from high school. It blended right into my college career, smoking 2 packs a day, partying all the time. And so my dad sent me a box of it was like a gag gift for my 19th birthday to imply that I was getting older and it was time to take care of myself. So I think there was it was a VHS tape of Gonga White and Tracy Rich that was in there. That was the beginning. And then some other things that implied, I was getting old, which is hilarious now at 41 because, anyway. But it started as a joke, and my roommate and I popped it in, and we were like, what is this? And literally seconds in, both of us were hooked. And what's phenomenal is she is also a yoga teacher in the Pacific Northwest, Allison Duckworth. Give her a little shout out.
Where is she teaching?
She's, I know she's in Portland right now, but I don't know the actual studio name. But she's amazing. I knew her as Allison Senegan, and we just, both of us became obsessed. And did we quit smoking? No. We would light up before and after, but it 100% planted a seed. Most of my life I'd been dissociating and, disassociating. And I think that was why I was so into doing drugs and everything that I was doing. And it was one of the first practices that I was actually in my body for, and there was a lot going on at that time in my family. My mom and dad had just gotten divorced, and, early stages of my eating disorder had started. And it was this amazing time for that hour and a half where I was just present in a way that I don't think I'd ever been, maybe not since I was 4 or 5.
Wow.
And so it started like that. And then it just became something that I would go to, and it was a safe place. But then I also started to get deep into my eating disorder. And so I started to use it. What was the kind place that it was, it very quickly morphed into not a place of punishment, but I just got really extreme with it because I'm just an extreme person. That's just my personality. I'm just like, you know, I mean, I try to level it out. That's why I do yoga, but I was like full on in, you know, and then suddenly it was like, had to be vegan and had to do this and, you know, had to practice 6 days a week, 2.5 hours a day. And it kind of quickly went to the other side. But, you know, that being said, I think, especially when I started teaching, it was still always a safe place. It was there. There were moments of that. I just was always toggling back and forth and being able to teach people and, you know, preach to them. And I do say preach on purpose, you know, that to be kind and to listen to your body. It was like, you know, we talked earlier about having our kids, you know, say to us, well, wait, but if you're doing that, why should I stop? And that was really the shift for me in making it a kinder place, is like, how can I come into this room and stand in front of all of you and like tell you you're not listening to your body and to be kind to yourself. And then I go home and, you know, I'm doing abusive stuff. So it was a long transition and shift, but a beautiful process. And, you know,
and how long did that process and shift take for you? So you started at 19 with the videotapes.
Yeah.
And then how long until you had moved into studios? And then how long did it take before you started to, well, you know, when you dove into like, you got to be vegan? Because I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Like when I jump in head first and it's in the deep end and I'm swimming, whether I have the right technique or not. I'm going in head first. So how long did it take for you to start with the videotapes till you walked into the studio, and then when you maybe stepped into Ashtanga, because we share that, and then when you started teaching? How long was that whole process? I mean, because first of all, there's so much to unpack in what you just said. I mean, the eating disorder, I think, is very important for people to hear about, because I know a lot of people struggle with eating disorders from a young age all the way through older ages. So I think that's huge. I think, you know, doing harm to our bodies is something that we're not only have habits of, but we're actually encouraged to do. Because I used to do the same thing. So first of all, I started my yoga practice in 2001. I was 25 because apparently I'm 6 years older than you are.
Which is nothing these days.
And I too was beating myself up. I mean, I drank my 20s away, like heavily, smoking, all kinds of things, like partying hard. So I think that's interesting that we both started at the same time. But back to you, how long was it until you moved into the studio? And then who were you practicing with? What made that change for you? Who assisted you along that process?
I mean, it felt like a huge gap at the time. So I graduated college in 2003. So I continued to do my practice. I went to a couple studios in Greensboro. That's where I went to college. I don't know if you know that story even. I got sent away to college.
No, I don't know that.
Okay, because I was like very happily I was like not even going to apply for anywhere. I was like, all right, I'm just going to go to SMC. That's where everybody else goes. It's basically grade 13. That's Santa Monica College for those of you not on the West Side. And then, but I didn't even apply. I just was not in a good place, right? I was in a dark place. So my mom applied to different colleges for me.
Wow.
She got me into 3 different places. One was Portland State. The other one was somewhere in New Orleans. And then this tiny college in Greensboro, North Carolina. And she was like, if she's in Portland, she'll get on a bus and come home. If she's in New Orleans, you know, she'll overdose, which is true. I probably would have. So they sent me, well, they didn't send me. They gave me the option. They said, move out and fend for yourself. Or if you go to this school, we'll continue to support you.
Oh, okay.
So I went to Greensboro College.
Of course.
And, you know, and I partied until I do think that VHS made a huge difference, because that was when I decided, okay, you know, it was that and a couple other things, which is a different podcast, and we want to get back to the question. But I had a moment of clarity, as they call it in sobriety. I didn't get totally sober, but I stopped the hard drugs and really focused on the yoga. I got into the bigger university there, University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And by the time I graduated, I was summa cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa and all that stuff. But it really did start in that same, it was all around that same thing, which was being embodied, having, you know, what went down. I got pregnant. You know, having this moment of clarity And then, you know, being able to make that shift. So when I went into UNCG, I was still doing yoga pretty regularly, but I was like doing it at home, still chain smoking, still drinking. Pretty much did that all the way through working in the film business. And then it was when I was working in the film business, 2005, that my sister was like, I got an ulcer. She's like, maybe this isn't sustainable. You should come to a physical yoga class with me. And that's when I went to Power Yoga for Brian Kest's studio.
Yeah.
And again, what quickly went from, you know, going out for drinks, because that's what you did. All the assistants in the biz would go out for drinks. Very quickly became me going to yoga 4 nights a week. I would go to the 8:30 classes, which is crazy now because I wake up at 4:30 and I'm like dead asleep by 8.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd go to these 8:30s. Allie Hamilton, Anna Suara, all amazing teachers still in LA.
Yeah.
And it just, you know, my old life just didn't fit anymore. Quit smoking and... Well, that's not entirely true. Because I did start again when I moved back in with my mom. But I partied much less. And then I started, you know, just started to slowly even itself out. I took my first teacher training in 2008.
You know, I want to talk about something really quickly.
This is my whole story. And then I was born. Sorry, everyone.
No, this is great. I think this is what helps people relate to us as teachers, you know, is to hear the backstory that is probably very similar to their experiences, which is what I want to talk about really quickly too, because I think it's amazing how you're able to look back upon those times when you, for example, were a chain smoker and you're okay with it. And I think that's a very important relationship to have with these parts of ourself, is to be okay with the times that we go through these different stages. Because I too was a smoker. I too was a drinker. I too did lots of drugs and I partied hard and, you know, maybe dated a few more women than I should have. That's a possibility. But I also don't look down upon myself for those times. You know, I think I read somewhere that they're one of the blue zones of the world. And I maybe it wasn't one of the blue zones. It was just one of the places where people live the longest. I think it was one of the Japanese islands. And they did a study on these people who lived longer than most people in that region. And they were all heavy chain smokers. And what they realized is that the psychological damage that people give to themselves is much more harmful than the actual smoking is the beating themselves up for smoking than the actual nicotine in the tobacco. And I think that's so awesome that you're able to joke about it. And especially for who you are today, because you are a leader within your community. You are a mother. I just went to your book launch party yesterday, and we're definitely going to talk about the book here in a second. But I want to acknowledge that I really admire the fact that you're able to just talk about it so openly and so freely, and the fact that you got pregnant when you were in college, which I'm assuming...
I had an abortion.
Yeah. I mean, because...
I was 17. Yeah.
I became a father at 18.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think you and I there's a lot of parallels in our lives. And
I want to move on from the smoking real quick, but I just had a memory. So the last time that I smoked, it was my 30th birthday party, and you were there, and I think it was with you. Like, I don't think you was like my last cigarette, but you were at my party.
Was that on Main Street?
Yes,
where were we at?
Yes.
I remember that party.
And like, I'm pretty sure you went and like, we were all smoking cigarettes in the back. We were all like hiding because we were teaching at the time too. And I'd been teaching for a while by that point, but I do remember you being there. And I think we shared a cigarette.
I think we did.
Yeah, I'm sure we did.
I'm sure we did.
That's, you know, I mean, different days. So like what comes up for me around that is the work that I do around like inner child healing work. You know, normally when you think of inner child healing work, you automatically picture yourself as like a little kid and you're 12 or 8 or, you know, these like very impactful moments of your life when you were younger. But I've been trying to do inner child healing work around the different former adult selves that I've had too. So, you know, even that, you know, hardcore A-type chain smoking, severely anorexic, early 20s, high ambition, like sitting with her and imagining her in the circle. I almost like imagine like a prism of all these different phases of self and getting to sit with all of them as I am now. Because so much of that, there was so much of it was avoidance and pain. And, that time was like, I was still grieving from my mom. My mom had only just died, 3 years before, which sounds like a long time, but it wasn't, as you know, with grief. And it was just like, and then even now as a mom, there's different phases of motherhood. Like when I first had Jonah, my first, and had postpartum anxiety, sitting with that phase. Sitting with the phase of being pregnant with Jacob and having a really difficult pregnancy. That's my second, and feeling split. And then even the early stages of having Jacob, which was only, 15 months ago.
Yeah.
So I try to have all those different phases. I want to accept all of them in the same way, not just like the cute, cool ones, the really, the darkest parts, the lightest parts, the brightest parts. It's all the same. These are all pieces of ourselves. And how can we sit with all of them and, hold space?
What I love about that is that it really reflects and illustrates actually that life itself is a practice and it's a journey. And it's not like we stopped learning in our youth. It's not like we stopped growing in our 20s. Just like we're not, we're still growing through our 40s. And we will continue to grow and go through these stages.
Neuroplasticity, it's like the changing of the brain will happen until it happen up until your hundreds if you want it to.
Yeah.
That's how the brain works. It's phenomenal.
And that's one of my favorite aspects of the yoga practice is that it gives us the space to continually observe how that change is going for us. How we are moving through these different stages and challenges and obstacles in life. Because as what I really liked about what Jessica Miller said yesterday, it really reflects is that parenting doesn't stop. You don't stop parenting once the kids are out of the house. It continues. Now, she mentioned she's got 4 kids in her 30s.
Yeah.
So she's got 4 kids in her 30s, and she's still like looking like, I wish they would do things differently. So what that told me was, and it really once again illustrates the fact that we continue to grow all the way until our final days. So even though, we do this inner child work, that I love that you do that in your young adulthood, because I myself, that's probably when I was most harmful, not only to myself, but to others. Yeah. It was when I was out on my own. I mean, I was out on my own at 17. I was paying rent and providing 100% for myself at 17. And I did a lot of harm, from the age of 17 all the way through early 30s. I didn't start teaching yoga until I was 33. And up until then, I beat the crap out of myself and smoked, drank, partied, did all the things. And it wasn't until I started teaching that things really changed for me. Because then I became accountable for what I was actually doing with myself. And just like you said, how you would walk into a class and you're like, how can I tell people to be kind to their bodies if I'm not myself being kind to mine? And that was probably a huge changing point for me as well when I started teaching, because I knew I needed to show up for my students. Because if I was going to talk the talk, I needed to walk the walk. And so that's a huge part. And that's when I started setting intentions. And that's when I knew I started to really practice, because when I did my first teacher training, I was practicing maybe 4 times a week. And then I did my first teacher training. And during the training, I practiced 6 days a week. And then after the teacher training, I started teaching immediately. And I was like, oh, I'm just practicing 6 days a week now. That's just what I do. And then it just carried on. And the reason I did that at the time was definitely for my students, because I knew I was a better teacher when I was practicing. I knew that I could guide people in a different way that they can relate to, that they can hold on to, that they can really allow that space to change within themselves. So I can totally relate to that. And I still do that as well. Still go back to the healing process of me as a young adult, because that was definitely the most harmful time of my life. It was really fun. I had a great time, but there's healing that could be done there still, probably, definitely.
Well, I mean, full disclosure, you know, I started teaching when I was 26, and I probably, you know, because I binged and purged every single weekend from the time I was, you know, 20 until I met Ben, and I moved up to San Francisco. So when was that? 2016. And that was every weekend, you know, and it's not like, and I want to make sure we're not knocking the 6-day-a-week practice. I still move my body 6 days a week. That's important. It was the intentionality behind it. It was the fact that I was going there because I had to. It was an obsession, and that was my, you know, it was my compulsion. I had to. And the binging and purging, you know, I would go Friday to Sunday every weekend, every single weekend from 20. You know, I mean, it was over a decade of that. And then show up at these classes, you know, hungover, basically, even though I wasn't necessarily, you know, I'd curbed my drinking, I'd curbed any drug use, but I would be hungover from the sugar and from everything else, and, you know, have to perform, right? And show up in this authentic way. And so you talk about the guilt and how much that tears you apart. Every weekend it would be the same thing, where I would go into it like, not going to be this weekend, you know, and then it would be every weekend. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. And the amount of guilt and, you know, and feeling like such a fraud, you know, when my whole thing has always been authenticity and always been living out in the open. And it wasn't until I met my husband, you know, that was the first time I think I'd ever like skipped a practice in the morning. I mean, I'm sure I had like for, you know, emergency purposes, but not like well over a decade. And I remember like because he was visiting, right? We met, like he was down here for work. And I skipped my practice the next morning, and I was like, whoa, like, what is this world? You know, and that it was okay. Or that when we were traveling in New York a couple months after we'd met, you know, I didn't do Ashtanga. I did just a normal vinyasa flow, and was like, oh, this is okay, you know, and it was just starting to open up in different ways. And then living with somebody is when I, you know, obviously I that all got curbed entirely. But yeah, I mean, it was, I just full honesty, like I was preaching it and not living it, you know? But I also think that that's what makes us teachers, you know, that's actually what gives us more to draw from, is I knew the pain that I was going through every day, and, you know, the struggles that I was going through. And it's like they say, the shoemaker's children have no shoes. Like, I think sometimes, you know, we're teaching our best when we're in our darkest of times.
And plus, we're also practicing. Yeah. You know, that's what's great about these challenges that we find ourselves in, is it's still a practice. Like, just because you weren't able to drop it cold turkey, you know, doesn't mean you weren't practicing to get yourself to where you are today. Yeah. Because you were, you know, because we all have, and I'm speaking for myself, you know, we all have our own rhythm of doing things. Like, we all need to take the time to move through what we need to move through in order to reach that place. And that's different for everybody. But the point is you're still practicing. We all know when we're in alignment with our practices or not. We know it. And when we go through that struggle, I think it's that struggle that's proof that change is occurring, and that it's going to end up being how we hope it to be. I really do believe that, because if not, you'd be happy with it. Yeah. You know, we'd still be drinking tons and smoking and purging and binging and being very harmful to ourselves. But we're not, because we had to go through that step-by-step process of putting those things down. You know, I put down alcohol and weed 2.5, going on almost 3 years now. And it was a process. I had to go through the stages in order to get me where I am today. And, you know, one of those stages is the accountability we have for ourselves in the presence of our loved ones. Like, it took for you to move in with Ben to really say, okay, I can't do this anymore, because you loved him and you wanted to be, I'm assuming, I don't want to speak for you, but you wanted to be the best representation of the self in that moment for him.
So I want to say something about that real quick, because let's talk about the isms and like addictions, right? I wish it was that simple. I wish it was as simple as moving in with someone you love and being like, I'm ready to be a better person for him. I don't consider myself a recovered anorexic, even though it morphed into bulimia. It's my way of thinking is always like as an anorexic, very, it's all about restricting and holding back. But I use ing, I use it as a gerund because I think that it's a everyday experience. And as much as I wish that it was as simple as moving in with someone you love or meeting the right person, I don't, that's not how alcoholism and addiction and, eating disorders work, which are, similarly tied in. With eating disorders, it's really control, right?
Yeah.
And anorexia is like controlling what you can. The bulimia is those moments of out of controlness. And as we talked about, the extreme, the one thing and then the other. But yeah, I mean, I want it, especially for the people listening, right? Like, it's like, I wish it was that simple. I wish it was as simple as like you meet someone and it just goes away, but I love what you were saying about everything we did was like a seed leading up to, every time I did it, and felt guilty was just another seed being planted for me to eventually stop. The few OA meetings, Overeaters Anonymous, that I went to were, planting seeds for me to eventually find a recovery program that works for me.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that it made me think about is meditation. So even though I was like meditating after our Ashtanga practice, I would always sit for 15 minutes, sometimes longer. I never had a dedicated daily Ashtanga practice meditation practice. But when recently, and this is since having my second son, which is wild, I now have a very consistent meditation practice, like half an hour every morning. And that's more important to me than my asana practice. But the only way that could have happened is if I'd gone through all those years of super physical asana, if I'd gone through all the therapy that I'd gone through, if I'd gone through all of the the pharmaceuticals too, like SSRIs, of all the recovery of the postpartum anxiety, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If I hadn't gone through all of that, I couldn't have gotten to my meditation practice. Where most people think you meditate to go through all those things. I just think it's an important, it was like, for me, I had to go the back route to get to it. And that was the only way that I could get there.
But you got there.
But I did.
Yeah. And everybody has their own path and their own pace at which they move through that path. Yeah. I definitely didn't want to make it sound like it's easy, because it's not easy. Like, putting all these things down is not easy. It's just in the face of our loved ones. Because I've always found that I am able to do much more. I'm able to withstand more discomfort for my loved ones than I am for myself, which is why in my yoga practice and my asana practice, because I still practice Ashtanga, and it's been like this for years. And every time I go through a challenging moment, I always remember my loved ones, because in every day in my practice, I dedicate it to my daughters and my wife, because I know that I will continue to move through discomfort for them. So what I say literally, I say, I'd like to dedicate this practice to my daughters, Jasmine Marie and Sequoia Lanai, and my wife, Megan Elizabeth. I thank you for coming into my life as my daughters, my partner, my teachers, and my lights. And I promise I will continue to practice so that I can better serve you as a father, as a partner, and as a friend. I say that every day.
It's beautiful. That's
why I get on the mat. That's why I'm able to go through these uncomfortable moments in my process of change, is for them. One of the reasons why I put alcohol down is when COVID first hit, I was still drinking. And when it hit, I was drinking heavy because everything closed.
Everybody was, yeah.
And so I just started drinking. I was drinking, I used to drink like 1 to 2 beers a night. And then during COVID, I was drinking like 6 to 8. And then I started polishing it off with a large glass of whiskey. And then I remember I was rocking Sequoia to sleep, because at the time she was still letting me rock her to sleep. And I was rocking, and I would sing to her. And I remember I was rocking her to sleep and singing to her. And I had the spins. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing right now? Like, seriously? This is how I want to be in this moment? I want to be drunk? I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, I knew that time was fleeting. I knew she wasn't going to let me rock her to sleep for very much longer. As a matter of fact, I think it only lasted another week. And so I was like, I gotta stop. And that's that process that I was talking about, of seeing how we show up for our loved ones is really like that reflection of who we are, which is, I think, the greatest gift of being a parent, is really seeing how you show up in that moment with this person, this little being whom you love more than anything else. Because, you know, I remember when Sequoia was born. So when Jasmine was born, I was 18. Not much self-awareness as an 18-year-old. I didn't start my yoga practice until I was 25. And even after I started my yoga practice, it took me many years before I actually had the awareness to look at how I was showing up for my loved ones. I had moments of clarity throughout that time. And I've always loved Jasmine. And Jasmine she was the one who placed unconditional love into my heart, no doubt about it. But it was Sequoia that really made me look at who I was as a parent, as a dad. Because Jasmine, although I was involved in her life, not like when Sequoia came in. Because when Sequoia came in, I was there every day. I was like full-time dad. You know, with Jasmine, I was part-time dad at best because I was a teenager and was out on my own and didn't go to college and didn't have a degree to take me into a career path that might, you know, allow me to provide for her in a much different way. I mean, I had to work my ass off. I was working 2 full-time jobs. I was working 90 to 100 hours a week, making like $4.25 an hour just to provide for myself and her the best as I could. And so when Sequoia came in, I was really able to be there for her and with her. And I really learned from my time with Jasmine how valuable it is to spend every possible moment with your little ones, because they grow up so fast, and before you know it, they're off doing their own thing. They're driving. With that said, I think 16 is much too young for kids to drive.
I live by a high school. Thank you.
Yeah.
I agree. Having crashed many cars at that age too.
Yeah, no, it's too young. It's too young. But I would learn, from this little angel, because as a parent, you get upset, you get frustrated. Those moments occur, but when they occur with your little one, you're like, okay, and this is my thought process. I would get upset, I would get frustrated because she wouldn't eat as much as I want to, or she would wake up earlier, or whatever, you fill in the blanks. And then I would feel frustration come to the surface. And then I'm like, okay, I'm getting frustrated at this little angel that has nothing to do with what I'm experiencing at this moment. So it must be all me. That's me. All of this that's coming to the surface is my stuff. That's what I loved about being a dad to a young little baby, is that it really showed who I was and how I was showing up in those moments. Because as people age, with an adult, for example, if I get frustrated with an adult, it's much easier for me to put the blame on them. Much easier, even though it's still mostly all my stuff. But it's much easier to put the blame on them because they are their own, human. Have their own flaws. You're not with them all the time. But your little one, you're like, I'm with you all the time. You're a little angel. You just came into this life. I haven't helped you in learning your challenges yet. So this is all my stuff. That's probably been one of the more transformational aspects of being a parent, for me anyways, is that little reflection that they provide for us in those moments. And which is why I put alcohol down for my daughters. That's why I did it. There are other benefits that has spilled over. I have to apologize a lot less to my wife and to all of my loved ones. My relationship with Megan is much stronger than it ever was when we were drinking, because she put it all down too. So that acknowledgement of the self and how we show up in the face of our loved ones is a huge part of my practice. And it sounds like it's also helped you.
I just want to say, because I know we're doing this for YouTube too, that if I have my baby, my baby is being walked around the block. So if like the phone lit up, I promise I'm super present. But no, I fully agree. I mean, you're explaining conscious parenting. Right, which is, so many parenting philosophies are look at the kid, look at the behavior of the kid. How can we change the behavior of the kid? Well, what we can't really control their behavior, right? We can't control another person. We can only control how we show up in the world.
Yeah.
So, being able to pay attention, from the toddler perspective, for example, is like my 1-year-old is here on this trip with me, right? Which is like, hence my compulsive checking to make sure he's okay. And he was absolutely losing it this morning. And it was really grating for me. I mean, it was really like, we're already coming off 48 hours of like, he's stage 5 clinger. And, Sean knows I was like leading the launch yesterday with him, like fully breastfeeding and, which was adorable and endearing at the time, but this morning I was tired. And he was tired. That's like, I had this realization as he was like, just like not even letting me, I was in eyesight and I couldn't even like walk a foot away. And I felt the irritation come up. And then I was like, wait, this poor guy, he's been completely rerouted. We're amongst strangers. Like this is my family that we're with. We're seeing old friends of mine, but he has no idea.
Yeah.
His naps have been completely messed up. It didn't matter. Like, normally he would have like a 4-hour window. He'd only been up for an hour and a half. And it was like taking that moment of pause to be like, where am I contributing? What's my role in this? Actually helped me get grounded too. I'm like, he's probably also picking up on my anxiety. I've got all these things going on. We're both displaced. It was just this really lovely moment of pause of what can I do in this moment? And I think it's easier to forgive a 15-month-old than, a 15-year-old. And you'll have to tell me, than when they're like, F you and in your face. But if we can actually have that moment of pause and be like, okay, well, no, I mean, look at what's been going on in the household throughout the week. Maybe they haven't eaten yet today. Maybe my energy's a little bit off. It's that moment of like the macro and really taking into perspective all that's going on around you so you can see the roles that you play. And then we can control the one thing that we can, right? Which is our response. Yeah.
And that's, I think, the hardest thing to do because we're constantly taking on the perspective of the micro, constantly, like diaper changing, feeding, making sure they're clean. Oh, they're crying. Did they fall? Did they hurt them? Like that's...
Well, you're surviving, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're surviving in the micro.
Yeah.
So it takes that moment to step back and look at the whole big picture before you can really ground and settle in, which I think is, I think that's such a valuable tool for parents to remember, is to really step back. What I liked about the conversation that you were having yesterday with the book launch is that pause. And what you just brought up now is like taking that pause and bringing awareness in and being like, okay, this is the experience in this moment. How am I contributing to this? And what's my role in the discomfort that I'm experiencing? Because oftentimes it's not necessarily the child's, for the lack of a better way of putting it, fault. It's our reaction to the moment. They're just in need of something. Every child is different. I know that. There are some, I was blessed with 2 easygoing daughters. The Jasmine was super easy as a little one. Sequoia, easy. Not as easy. She's always been extremely opinionated, but still very like go with the flow. So when there's a disruption, it's easy to figure out what that is. What is the cause? How can I assist her in that moment? But we do, it can be tiring and it can get hard. And to take that moment of pause and to step back and look at the big picture. And for me, what has always helped is to remember that it's truly just about love. That's what it's all about. So am I loving in this moment is usually how I handle the disruption within me. Is this moment is fleeting. It will be gone soon. am I loving in it? Because if I'm not, first of all, why not? And how can I shift that? Now, I may not appreciate the moment, but I can still be loving within it. And that was a big one for me, because I'm an only child. I was out on my own at 17, so I've had to live kind of like, and I was a latchkey kid. You know, I was on my own. I was cooking at 5 years old. I was, you know, preparing my own meals at that age and on. I would come home to an empty house until late in the night because my mom was a single mother and doing what she can to raise this only son. And I'm sure I was a handful. So I have this toughness and this grit and this need to just be strong. And sometimes that could, what I have found through parenting, that could also lead me to be rigid. Yeah. And so to step back, as you so put it, and take a breath. And what I do is say, am I being loving in this moment? Am I an expression of love? And if not, let me change that.
Yeah, or step away, right? Like, as I you know, we can't always be love if you're heightened in the moment and your fight or flight response is going, right? If you are, there's a great woman named Dr. Laura Markham who wrote a book called Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids. And she's, you know, she talks about the fight or flight response and how, you know, when you're in a heightened state, you are perceiving whatever that is as an enemy or an attack. So whether that's your partner or your kids, in that moment, your nervous system is seeing this as a threat.
Yes.
So you're responding as such. So in those moments, and especially the way that the brain works, right? Because when we go into those states, that's the lower levels of the brain. That's a really primal, you know, that's why we talk about reacting versus responding. That, you know, I don't want people to beat themselves up because they, you know, have a moment where you snap or, you know, where you feel anger. It's the ability and the wherewithal to get grounded, to get into your feet, to access the higher levels of the brain and to be able to say, I'm not going to say anything loving right now. I really need to step away. And what's interesting is, you know, there's this whole movement about time in versus time out. And time out, you know, when we were kids was like, go sit in the corner, you know, you need to calm down. When really it was often the parent that needed to calm down.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And so like, you know, first of all, time ins then are the parent going and spending time with the kid instead of sending them to their room. So everybody's regulating together. But sometimes it's us that needs the timeout, like as the parent, like, you know, and to say, like, mama's going to go and take a breath right now, you know, and they like one of the moms was sharing yesterday at the panel about like, you know, going and washing your hands and, you know, that people know in your family that that's what you're going to do. And I love that, you know, you want to keep getting back to love, but that it's okay to, it's impossible to live in that state at all times. It's just not how we're evolutionarily wired, you know, but because I want to make sure we give parents tons of permission too.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, I was like, I literally, my toddler is at home and my preschooler is at home with my husband. And I was like crying. I miss him so much. And then this morning he was being so annoying. And I was like, you know, and again, like obviously, what do I need? And that's actually what brings back the point is like, if I'm getting annoyed at my baby for being annoying and my toddler for both being annoying, it's like, oh, well, that's when, you know, okay, it's okay for me to be annoyed in this moment, but what do I need for myself? Well, I needed to have some space to get grounded. The baby needed to go to sleep. My toddler is missing me. And it's all like, you know, but it's also like, it's okay that I got annoyed. Do you know what I mean?
For sure. Oh, absolutely. Sense? Yeah, absolutely. You know, I agree with you 100%. I think we need to make sure that people have the space to move through their feelings as well. Yeah. I mean, as parents, we have to provide ourselves the space, just like with the smoking and the drinking. Like, you have to be okay with those parts of the self. Otherwise, they won't be able to change. Like, if you don't provide love to those parts of the self, then how will it change? You know, first of all, I've been a parent for almost 29 years. So it's a
big chunk of your life.
It's most of my life. Yeah. And so I have had to go through these practices for a long time. It's not like I've been able to just come to this place of, okay, let me just be loving in this moment. Yeah. It took me a long time to be able to do that. I'm able to do it now, which is huge. And I've, I've also gone through some very difficult things with parenthood, and that has also led me to be able to stop and be loving. I used to need space. I used to have to walk away. I used to have to find something else to ground. I used to need something external. Sometimes it would be my yoga practice. Sometimes it would be a meditation practice. Sometimes it would, I've had times where I needed a drink, where I needed a smoke, where I needed to yell, where I needed something, not at the child, but out just into the ether. There have been those times in my life of a parent that I needed to do those. But because of everything that I've gone through as a parent, I now have the tools to stop, take a breath, turn it into love. Yeah. So I agree, like, give yourselves the space to go through what you need to go through, but it's also still just a practice that eventually you'll be able to just turn on. And, I hope I hope no parent has to go through what I've had to go through in order to get to that place, but it's been the journey of parenthood that has helped me be able to. So yeah, it's a practice, parenting, and, which is why you wrote your book, The Yoga of Parenting, which I would love to start to talk about. Because first of all, if you need to take care of Jacob, it's okay. Like, if you got to stop this, we could stop it. If you can, if they need to come inside the house, like, we can let them in the house. So I can text Megan and
maybe I'll see if they want to come in the house.
Yeah, they can come in the house and hang out. If he likes dogs, our dogs are nice.
Okay.
So it's totally cool.
Okay.
This is parenting.
I just got pictures back from my Bay Area launch party, and Jonah was literally like laying down, just flailing, like completely having a tantrum, like in the middle of everything during all the presentations. And everybody was like, and I'm like, no, this is it. This is part of it, right? This is all part of it. Okay. Well, I just texted her to let her know. Yes, okay. Little Jakey Bobakey. Something I wanted to say too is, obviously, what you have gone through, and, it's amazing that we are able to sit here and talk about it. And I love that we have Jasmine's phone in the room with us. Yeah. I'm so honored that I got to meet her and, see her and sit, even though it was virtually, sit in rooms with her. And as horrific as an experience as it is, we are at risk of losing our children at every moment. And, I think living with that awareness, mine was having the significant death of my mom, but, you had to go through that, which I'm, I can't even say the words for. I just want to hold the space for that. But that it changed your view on parenting on the other side. I mean, of course, right? You lose your daughter, and then it's going to change how you're approaching everything in life. Yeah. But what if we all lived with that awareness, right? Like, what if, I think we just forget, we just assume we're going to be with these children until their adulthood. What if we all lived with the awareness of the fleetingness of it? What if we knew that every day was a gift? Because there is no guarantee in this life for any of us, and we take that for granted. And I hate that you had to go through it to get to that other side. But how beautiful now that you get to share with other people, wake up, treat every day as the blessing and the opportunity that it is, because it is. It absolutely is. And even though someone may not experience loss in their life, this is how life is, unfortunately. That's the beauty of it, right? That's what makes it so damn beautiful. Yeah. Is how temporary it all is. Yeah. And it does. Yeah. It makes every moment so valuable. Yeah. Every single moment. That's why I spend as much time with Sequoia as I can. I don't, I spend every night with her. I spend every morning with her.
we do our things. I pick her up from school. I drop her off at school. I do all of the things because, you don't
want to miss a moment.
I don't want to miss a single one.
I think about you in the mornings too, because when we did the IG Live and you talked about that, and, I'm a bit of a workaholic, that's kind of where all my isms have been shuttled into, right? And I think about it, and I think about you all the time, like when I'm with my kids, because I'm like answering an email or, I'm doing something that's, not being present with them in the moment. And our IG Live that we had was so impactful to me because I remember you saying in the mornings, you don't work, right? You're focused on Sequoia entirely and wholly. And, it's just, again, like these are beautiful lessons that we get to impart, you now get to share with other parents. And like, even just hearing the story from you, I know it's obviously not even close to a consolation for your loss, but do know that that's always in the back of my mind. And I think about it all the time as I pick up my phone to go and check. And then I think, no, like I remember the story. I remember what you said and I put it down, and then I'm able to be present with my boys in a different way.
Yeah, no, it's thank you for that. I'm glad that that conversation provided you with that. And that's why I wanted to have it. And that's why I continue to have these conversations, because I know that my experience can help people. Because I one of the things that I've told my kids, especially Jasmine as she was growing up, is I would say there's two ways of learning things. There's the easy way and the hard way. I'm giving you the easy way right now, and that's what I think these conversations are, is the easy way for somebody to learn how valuable those moments are, because I had to learn the hard way. And it's not, I hope nobody has to learn that way again. I know that some people will, but it's extremely unfortunate, but it's also the other side of it is that I then get to give everything to Sequoia and share with the people around. Is there a knock at the door?
Yeah.
Yes. You want to let him in?
That's my baby.
Yeah. Hello, Jacob.
Hi. So Jacob is now here with us.
Hello. Yes.
I hope we'll be doing some editing. Otherwise, people are just fully.
But no, look at this beautiful boy.
Yeah.
Hello.
Well, we were saying really quickly the idea between the hard way and the easy way. I mean, the reality is to get the lesson on the other side, to have the growth edge of it, or to have the, I don't want to say transformation, I'm like, that's what I'm hesitating, is like, I don't love the word transformation, because I do think so much of these experiences are helping us return to who we truly are. But I think you do unfortunately have to go through it sometimes. So we can share about this and we can tell people. You can say to someone, wake up every morning and be appreciative.
Yeah.
But until you have, I lost my mom, my brother, my aunt, multiple grandparents, great aunts and uncles, all within a very short time. Like, until you go through the gauntlet that is grief and death, you don't really know. But we can tell people. I mean, we can try. And unfortunately fortunately, that is the bittersweet beauty of having those experiences, is that it wakes you up in a way that you had never been before until you lose someone you love like that.
Yeah.
And then it gives you an opportunity for all the relationships you have after that to be fully and wholly present, and it becomes a little bit of a gift.
Yeah, no, it truly does. And that's what I've been trying to really, keep a hold of, because at times, the grief will hit me sometimes pretty hard. But then I have conversations with people, and like, there was a student of mine who lost his son exactly the same way that I lost Jasmine. And he reached out to me, and I've been able to support him. And I went down and I spoke with his family just a couple of days after the passing. And what I was able to share with them, what I was able to share with them was extremely helpful. And that's another gift that I see from this, from the loss is the opportunity to support others who might experience the same thing. Yeah, no, it's, a long time ago in my practice, as you know, I set intentions, and I remember a friend of ours whom we lost about just over a year ago, came down, found out she had cancer. She found out she had breast cancer. And as soon as she found out she had breast cancer, she started to live her life in a different way. He can play with... Can you play with that? Yeah. He could totally play with it. He could play with most things. And I'm just trying to think of, there might be some not very baby-friendly things, but okay. Other than that...
This is part of it, everybody.
Yeah,
this is part of it.
I haven't had a baby in the house in a long time.
Hello.
But, to give ourselves this space to live the life we want to live every moment, because this friend of ours, she was told she had cancer and started to live differently. And my thought when that happened was, why wait until we have a death sentence before we start living the lives we truly want to live for ourselves? Why not make it a life sentence? Give yourself something to live for every day, because you are alive, and the ones that are still around you are still around you. Like loving those moments and living those moments to their fullest, because this moment's going to be gone. He's 15 months old now. As you know, he's going to be 3 or 4 years old before you know it. Before that, he's going to be 12, 13 and a teenager and wanting to look really cool in front of his friends. And, and that's
he won't be a stage 5 clinger at 13.
Maybe there is that possibility. There is. But, it's.
I fully agree. And, I think that's also something that's interesting about being in the West, right? Is like, there are many cultures and, like India, which is the birthplace of yoga, or, in Mexico with Cinco de Mayo, where death is at the forefront. It's something that's lived every single day, right? Mm-hmm. It's not only, it's celebrated. It's a new beginning. It's a transition for certain things. But here in the West, we really shroud it and we hide it. And then when it happens, it's horribly shocking, right? And it's like, it feels like it's like you've been hit, over the head. You don't even know, what has happened. You can't even process it because it's never really been discussed. I mean, I talk about this in my book, Which Years is Lost Somewhere in Venice. Which is, that my parents never talked to me about death before our first loss in our family. And I feel like it was a lack of an education on death, and that, I'm very open with my kids about death. My son and I went to the pet store, and there was a dead frog, and I'm like, it's a dead frog. This is a part of the cycle of life and death. Yeah. And I want it to be normalized. That's Jacob touching the mic if you're listening at home. Not to say that like it's about being grim, but it's about the beauty of it, right? It's like, everything is fleeting. Everything is temporary. We learned that in a really significant way during COVID because so many of us were complacent in our lives, and we thought that, everything we had would stay the same. But I mean, look at our community. The yoga world is completely decimated. Yeah. And, we can sit and wallow in it, or we can, use that to our advantage to, like you said, be appreciative every day, and to make sure that you're living your life, as I'm going to feed him, as, in the best possible way, right? And like, I mean, my mom's death changed my life. It changed the trajectory of my life. And do I miss her every single second of every day? Absolutely. Do I wish she was here for my boys? 1,000%. But, at the same time, what a beautiful gift I got. What a beautiful gift. My entire life changed. I became a yoga teacher. Yeah. I got healthy for myself. I started helping others. I now have this different approach to how I live every single day. Yeah. So I wish someone would lose their parent or lose a child? Not in 1,000 million years. But when you do, there is a beauty on the other side of it. There really is, as hard and horrible as it is. No, there is. And I think you're absolutely right that our culture doesn't really talk about it, and it
fears it.
Yeah.
And I think it's that, I've always found fear to be harder to deal with than the actual situation for most things. And as a parent, as soon as your babies are born, fear.
It's like before they're born. It's the second that the lines come up on the stick, literally.
The fear is real. Whew. I talk about this with like a few of my dad friends. I remember when Sequoia was a baby, and I used to live on the 3rd floor of a building, and I remember I'd be walking, and I'd be like walking down the stairs, and the fear would kick in, and be like, what if I fall and trip and down these stairs and I land on the baby? And like, oh my God, like the amount of fear that comes in is incredible. But to get back to the death part and about how we can normalize it, talk about it in a way that it doesn't have so much fear surrounding it. So I had to have this conversation with Sequoia, because Sequoia and Jasmine were close. They loved each other, and they were sisters, and they knew it. And, I had to tell Sequoia that Jasmine had passed, and it was really hard for me. So I found out Jasmine passed on a Wednesday, and it was the Wednesday before my birthday. My birthday was on a Friday. It was 2 days before my birthday that I found out that Jasmine had passed away. And we had plans that for that weekend, we were leaving Thursday to go to Big Bear, to go up to the snow. And it was Megan.
Was supposed to come, right?
No, she was in Idaho at the time. It was just Megan, Sequoia, and I. So we had plans, and we stuck to the plans, but we had to tell Sequoia, because as soon as I found out that Jasmine had passed, Sequoia brought Jasmine's name up in between Wednesday, and we ended up telling her Saturday morning. Sequoia brought up Jasmine, no joke, no exaggeration, 150 times.
She was sensing it. Right?
Yeah, she knew.
There was something, yeah.
And I had to tell her, and I had to tell her that, that her sister was gone. And it's so funny too, because even there are people in my life, even family members, I won't say who, because I might embarrass them. But there are family members that told me not to tell her, not to tell Sequoia.
Like ever?
Yeah.
Or like not until she got older?
Yeah, who knows? But, just not to tell her now, then, because Sequoia was 6, had just turned 6, 6. She had just turned 6. And, people were telling me, don't tell her, that, and I'm like, I have to tell her. It's her sister. She knows. And so, good catch. And
mom instinct.
So we sat her down. We were in Big Bear. We had rented a cabin, and I had taken like some sage and an eagle feather, and I called everybody to sit down. She goes, "What are we doing?" I said, "Oh, we're gonna have a little ceremony." She goes, "How come?" I go, "Well, there's something that I have to tell you." And she goes, "Is it bad?" I'm like, "Well." She goes, "Is it about Jasmine?"
Oh yeah, of course she knew.
Yeah, I said, "Yeah." And she asked, she goes, "Did she die?" And I said, "Yeah, she did." And then she started crying, and I started crying, and Megan started crying, and Sequoia looked at me and she goes, "Why are you crying?" I go, "Because I miss her." And Sequoia, she stood up and she kissed the sky and she said, "Love you, sis." And she started singing to me to console me. And I wouldn't have had that experience had I not told her. Yeah. And it was powerful. And then we got to talk about it. And then I got to tell her that,
Uh-oh. You hit your head?
If you want to see your sister, you look into the sky. You look at the sunset. You know, if you want to hear her, you listen to the wind blowing through the leaves of the trees. You'll hear her again. And, you know, to celebrate life when it passes, I think is extremely valuable, because as hard as it was, we still got to have that time together. Jasmine placed unconditional love in my heart, no doubt. And then Sequoia got to know her sister. Megan got to know Jasmine.
I always say that I would have rather had the 27 years with my mom, or 20, you know, I turned 27. She died a couple weeks after. So that, you know, 20, whatever, what's the math? It's really 26, 27, however long, however short, however fleeting. I would have rather have had that than a lifelong relationship where we were disconnected.
Yeah.
Right? And as short and sweet as it was, like, it left an indelible impact. And, you know, I think that that's part of the beauty sometimes of those that are with us for just short amounts of time, is like, it's that huge impact in a short amount of time. And, you know, I mean, we can't control when they go, when they come, and we can only thank you, you know, be grateful for the time that we do have.
Yeah. Because that's all we ever have.
Exactly.
Is that time. And it's just like with our kids, with our partners, with our family, with our pets, with ourselves. Like, this time is the only time we get. And that's, and, you know, getting back to that being one of the you know, things that I experienced that has taught me the ability, has given me the ability to be able to shift into love, is, you know, because I had that experience. Yeah. And I know that this is the only time we get. Yeah. And so might as well spend that time loving, you know, because it's going to be over, you know, hopefully, you know, getting back to the fear, it also placed a lot of fear in myself again, because after Jasmine passed, the thought of losing Sequoia was like, you know, substantially greater. The fear of losing Sequoia was like, holy shit. Like, if I lost Sequoia, I don't know what the fuck I would do. Oh, sorry. I'm like,
no, it's my kid.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know what I would do. And then I remember thinking, well, I hope I go before they do.
Yeah, I have those thoughts all the time. Yeah, I'm like, please God, like, you know, I'm gonna get you your thing. I'm like, you know, please God, I can't imagine being here without them. Like, just take me first.
I had those same thoughts. And then there was a moment that I had. Oh, look at that.
Oh, look at this. Jakey's got some crackers. Thank you. Oh, how lovely.
He just got a smile on it.
Thank you, guys. He loves him some pretzels.
Oh, good.
Yeah, see?
Thanks, babe.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So I remember I had those fears, and I held on to those fears for a while. I was like, please let me go before anybody else that I love, please. And then I had a realization of how difficult it was for me, and that if I want to be the type of father and the type of husband that I want to be, then I don't want my loved ones to go through what I just went through.
Interesting.
By losing me. And so then I thought, if I lose them before they lose me, maybe that's better. Because I've already gone through this. I know what it's like. I don't want them to have that experience. That was
That's so profound. I mean, I hadn't really thought about it like that, right?
It took me a long time.
Selfish. It's almost like I'm eating. Sorry, it's motherhood. I'm trying to cut his grapes in half. You're right. It's actually selfish of me to want to be the one to go first because it's me not wanting to deal with the pain.
Mm-hmm. That's what I had to go through.
How interesting. I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I see people still standing, I see people who have lost multiple children, I mean, especially I'm in the program of Al-Anon, children and family of alcoholics, and people are still standing right there. And then I see people laugh. I see people smile. I see that it is possible. But I hadn't really, I mean, and it is kind of like, that's me looking out for me in that moment.
Yeah.
Instead of them.
Yeah. And it was a hard realization for me to come to because the fear was so strong and I had just gone through it. And the last thing a parent wants to do is think about that even happening. But it was a realization of that selfishness within me, of me not wanting to have that pain again. But then shifting it to me willing to take on that pain so that my loved ones don't have to feel it.
Jacob just burped, everybody. I'm sorry. No, that's something I had not thought about that until you said that. That's a really interesting, because it's about it's the inability to withstand our own pain and our own grief. Yeah. I mean, it's just part of it, right?
Yeah.
It's part of it as dog owners. We unfortunately experience it multiple times throughout our lifetime because, dogs have such shorter lifespans, and it's the hardest part, but also the most beautiful part of it too, right? We really appreciate these little beings for the time that we had them in our lives. And I love the idea of, waking up every day with that awareness, I don't think it's morbid at all. I think it's a really beautiful thing. I'm glad that yoga teaches us Shavasana, and the death on the other side. I think it's important,
Yeah.
I don't think I'd ever really considered it before practicing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then having that awareness and, embracing it as a normal, natural, beautiful part of the cycle of life and death,
Yeah.
It changes how you live.
And that's what I think is the most valuable aspect of Shavasana within the practice. That's why, I always tell people that it's the most important pose, as I'm sure you do and as a lot of teachers do, because it gives us the opportunity to have that experience of that final rest after the span of your practice, after that lifespan, is to have that rest, to have that experience.
I will pick up all the food that's on your floor.
I will pick it up if the dogs don't just eat it.
Oh my gosh.
Let's talk about your book really quick, because I know we got to wrap this up. So Yoga of Parenting.
The Yoga of Parenting.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing your insights in there. I quote Sean, and specifically the metaphor or the correlation between parenting and surfing, and, because it's and the yoga, the parenting and the surfing, and tying all those three things together, because I think so much of that ebb and flow of the ocean is exactly what we're talking about, right? The coming and the going and the flow of it all. Oh, okay. Bye.
You're funny, dude.
He's a very funny little guy.
So tell me about your book. Just briefly, I know, once again.
I mean, it's the Yoga of Parenting, 10 yoga-based practices to help you stay grounded, connect with your kids, and be kind to yourself. And I think in many ways that number 3 is the most important part of it. A lot of the parenting books that I was reading prior to having my first and, shortly after were great. And I learned a lot, but, like we talked about earlier, a lot of them were behavior based and, this is what you need to do to change your child. And, if you don't follow this exact equation and this exact formula, like you're going to mess your child up. Right. And they all kind of left me feeling bad because, you go into and again, this goes back to the fight or flight as well. You go into a moment of fight or flight, you have a screaming baby in front of you or a screaming toddler. And then you're like trying to reason, right? You're trying to remember like, oh, wait, what's the formula? So I have to say this first. Okay, get down on his level, say that. And not to say those aren't important things that we need to practice. But, you know, I wanted a space, and whether it's a book or, you know, these gatherings that I'm trying to create, where we could talk about it all, and we could be really accepting of all of the different phases, and to, rather than having the focus on the kid and their behavior, let's bring the focus back onto ourselves. And that's what the book is about. The book is about doing the work as parents, like you said, you know, so that that pause is available to us, that we're aware in those moments, this is what we're working with, you know, and, you know, just going back to this morning of like, you know, this is like my irritation is me and not him necessarily. And, you know, what can I do? What do I need in this moment to take care of myself so that I can better serve my children?
Yeah. No, that's great. I think it's so valuable and so important because, you know, we don't have manuals for this type of stuff. Like, we're not just given, it's like, you know, you're becoming a parent. They're like, okay, this is how you do it. We're not given that mostly. And plus the generations before us, as good a job as they did and tried to do, you know, there's definitely new tools that we have to in our access that we can utilize that are much more grounding and much more supportive in a way, like you said, in conscious parenting. You know, because as great a job as my mom did, you know, she also wasn't given great tools, you know. And so she was given some tools. My mom was a great mom. She was very loving. She loved me, and I knew that, and I felt it, and she supported me in so many different ways. But she, you know, she did the best she could, and now I get to take what she gave me, add my own, you know, flavor to it, and provide that for my kids. But it is important. You know, I always think about, you know, when you fly in a plane. I remember when I had this realization, when you fly in a plane and they're given the safety briefing, it's much different than today than when I was younger, when they used to give the safety briefing. You know, they'd be a flight attendant up at the front, and they'd be going through everything, the seat belt, and then the airbag would drop down if the cabin would lose pressure. And they would say, you know, if you're traveling with a child, please make sure you secure your breathing apparatus before that of the child. And I remember flying as a young child going, that's messed up. I thought it was women and children first. You know, what about me? And then I realized that, and to your point of the parents needing to take care of themselves, if you're traveling with a child on a plane and the cabin pressure is decreased, and you place the breathing apparatus on the child and you pass out,
yeah,
then that child is on its own.
Yep.
So you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of the child. And that, I think, is probably the most valuable lesson that we can take away from as parents, at least in this conversation, is the absolute necessity of taking care of yourself so that you can best serve your children, your loved ones, your friends, your coworkers, your pets, whomever it is, which is exactly why I say in my practice, once again, I dedicate this to my family, because I want to show up as the best version of myself in every moment, even though and it's a practice, because there will be times when I don't, you know, there still is. I mean, much less because I am practicing, but there are moments where I'm like, oh, like I have to apologize. I still have to apologize, and I do. Yeah. And you know what I think is also important in apologizing, I think I did say this in your IG live interview that we did, and that is, in my apologies, I always promise that I won't do it again, because it's in that promise that change occurs. Because you can do something, you can behave in a way, you can act in a way, and just apologize and then do it again. But I have found, anyways, if I promise to never do it again, I am consciously making the effort to change that behavior, instead of just apologizing and then allowing it to happen again and apologizing and apologizing. Just because I promise that it won't happen again doesn't mean it won't. But I'm committing to not allowing it to happen again. And if it does, I get to recommit to it not happening. And it's in that promise and of my commitment of changing that I have found for me is the true element of change. So then I don't do it again. So I don't have to act in that way, because I still have to apologize to Sequoia. You know, she'll frustrate me, and my tone will be in a way that's. But
also, like, I hope you do. I hope there's incidences where you mess up and then you get to have the repair with her, because as conscious and as lightened as we want to be in our parenting journey, that's not the rest of the world, right?
Yeah.
And they are only with us for a temporary amount of time.
Yeah.
So who better to learn that process of disconnection and repair than with those that you love the most in this world?
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to see you show up as a human, I mean, the only thing I love, the apologizing and saying, the promise to not do it again. For me, I would have to add the word try, because like the acknowledging my imperfections and, even just my own guilt and how I beat my self-flagellation, and beating myself up. He wants the mic. Is that I would have to say I will try not to do it again for me, because I know that if I said I won't do it again, then I will do it again, then that just sends me down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But how wonderful that you guys get to have those disruptions and repairs, because how else is she going to be able to show up in the world?
Yeah.
And be able to do the same thing, to be able to say to someone or her partner, oh, I'm sorry, I took a tone I didn't mean to, or, I really just needed to eat this morning, or, conversely, to say to someone, no, that's unacceptable. You can't speak to me that way.
Yeah.
I love the idea of conflict and resolution, because, I would love to live in a utopia where we never have disruption and disconnection, but that's just not human connection, unfortunately.
No. And that means change is occurring.
Yeah.
We're changing, we're learning, we're growing, expanding, grounding, centering, being more loving, like all of those things. Where can people find your book?
James,
for all the parents out
there.
For
everybody that's listening, he is literally, he just made, the baby made his body like dead weight, and he slithered off of my lap and under the table where he's going to get his other pretzels. So we don't need the dogs after all. I think he'll clean it up. Everyone's like, what, cringing. So everybody you can buy my book wherever books are sold. I always say that if you want to go into a physical bookshop, which, let's support local bookstores, because they really are, it's bookstores are suffering.
Yeah.
You go on IndieBound, and then you'll be able to just look up on your zip code where it's being sold next to you or near you.
Okay.
And then, follow me on Instagram.
Yeah.
I'm laughing because Sean and I were just talking about taking social media hiatuses, and that's not in my plan, but I hear it as I say it. But yes, you can follow me on Instagram. You can find me on my website, Sarah Ezrin Yoga. And we're just, I'm always looking forward to connecting and hearing other parents' stories, and just so grateful to be here. And thank you for your patience.
Of course.
As a dad. I mean, that's the cool thing about doing these interviews and getting to talk to other parents is like, you all get it, right? I mean, I think, similarly, and maybe this is just our culture, where you have a baby and then suddenly it's like, keep him out, you got to go show up at work and, act as if you didn't even have a child. But let's change that, let's embrace these phases of, now he's got the guitar, early parenthood, and let's figure out spaces where we can let it all be integrated.
Yeah.
No,
I love that.
Podcast. Let's do it.
I think that's also very important, is that we normalize parenting. Like having a child with you, like just a few minutes ago and yesterday at the launch party, you had to breastfeed.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's a part of being a parent, a very important one.
Yeah.
So normalizing that and allowing it to be okay.
I had to apologize to one of my high school boys was there, and I was like, what's interesting? In 27 years, you've never seen my boobs. It had to be yesterday. All my high school girlfriends like, we've seen them plenty of times. I'm like, I know you have, but isn't it interesting that our friend Fro has never seen my boobs?
That's funny.
But yeah, I mean, I had to, right?
Yeah.
And it's sustaining life, and let's all these things, let's live with all of them at the forefront. Let's bring them all into the room. It goes back to the inner child blessing, and, having all the phases of yourself in the room with you, having all these parts of us our children, our deaths, are the most beautiful aspects, the darkest aspects. Let's bring it all into the room with us, because that's what makes it so damn beautiful.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm going to put the links to your website and any other links that you want in the description of this podcast so people can get a hold of you. Are you still teaching?
Yes. I mean, I am teaching online.
Okay.
I am teaching right now. Currently, I don't know when we're going to air this, but yes, I am currently teaching online for Center for Yoga.
Okay.
I am also teaching a private, but I don't know. I don't know what the future brings. I'm enjoying writing more than I'm teaching right now. My body is also pretty spent.
Yeah. 2
babies, 1 shoulder surgery, another torn labrum on the other side. And
wow.
Who else? What I'm sure it's like pages of a report if I was to get the MRI. So it's been tough. I still do asana, but it's just very different.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, we'll see where it all goes. I love teaching.
Yeah. Writing is teaching as well.
It's its own form. Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I actually think it's a broader way of teaching, because you get to reach more than people that are just listening to your voice.
Yeah.
They get to hear your words and feel your words and learn from them. And I hope that your book is translated in many, many languages, because I think people can really gather some very important tools from yoga and parenting in particular, because most people in the world either are or will become parents. And so this is a great tool for people to move into their relationships with their children, because that will ultimately teach their children how to be parents when it's time for them, if they decide to walk down that path themselves. So Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean.
I really appreciate you, and I really love you.
Everybody listening and watching for your patience.
Yeah, and thank you, Jacob, for your patience.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Jacob.
Yeah, thank you, dude. Thanks,
did
man.
A great job. He's putting the water bottle cap on his toe.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he's like, all right, guys, wrap it up.
That's a wrap. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for having me.
Of course.